Good morning. Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist of Medfield.
An especially warm welcome to all who are visiting. We hope you'll stay for social hour downstairs following the service. And of course, welcome to all who are streaming in from home.
This meeting house where we gather this morning was built in 1789. However, this is the third meeting house of this congregation, which first gathered in 1651, settling here on this land that was and is still now the homeland of the Nipmuc Nation, who inhabited this area for thousands of years.
While we realize we cannot undo the harm that has already been caused to the Nipmuc Nation, we strive to prevent further harm and to find ways to support our Indigenous neighbors, as our faith calls us to do. In your order of service, you will find a link to our website of ways in which we can help.
Holding all of this in our hearts, we welcome you here to this place. Here we search for truth and understanding. Here we celebrate life and we contemplate its mysteries. Here we share healing and wholeness. So whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever you believe, whomever you love, we welcome you to this congregation. In the words of the Reverend Jack Mendelson, a former minister of the Arlington Street Church in Boston, he says, "Here in this sanctuary of ancient dreams and wisdom and beauty, we come to grow, to be healed, to stretch mind and heart, to be challenged, renewed, to be helped in our own continuing struggles for meaning and for love, to help build a world with more justice and mercy, to be counted among the hopers and the doers. In the face of cynicism, darkness, brutality around us and within us, we seek to align ourselves with a living community that would affirm rather than despair, that would think and act rather than simply adjust and succumb. Here we invite the spirit of our own humanity and the healing powers under, around, through, and beyond it, to give us the nerve and the grace, the toughness and the sensitivity, to seek out the truth that frees and the life that maketh all things new. Come, let us worship together.
Abides by Martha Kirby Capo. Through the week, this chalice abides, cupped and silent. Softly it gleams in a dimly lit room, complete unto itself. Today, we come together as a community of faith, joyful and free. Our individual energies combine to spark the flame of truth. May we each draw strength for the other, and like the chalice, may we be bathed in the fire of commitment to social justice, equity, and peace.
I'd invite you to stand as you're willing and able. Together we will read our unison covenant, which you will find on the back page of your order of service. And this morning we'll be reading lines 1, 2, and 3. Love is the foundation and spirit of our congregation, and we declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity. As people of goodwill, we covenant with one another to explore our values freely and honor our diversity of beliefs and experiences as sources of strength. Please remain standing for our opening hymn. Now the green blade riseth. It's number 266 in your gray hymnal, and we're going to be singing just verses 1 and 3. Invite Kate Chiavara up to lead us in our moment for all ages, and if any of the kiddos want to come up and get a better view, you're invited to do that as well.
Hello, everyone. Quick story, when I was in college, I was a Spanish major, which means I had to take a lot of Spanish classes. This included Spanish poetry and books, classes where we dissected poems and books to better understand them, and it was one of my favorite things to do. To read poems in English or Spanish and pore over them until I'd taken apart every line, every word, every letter to make it make sense to me. Do you guys have a favorite poem you can think of that you remember? Is there a poem you like? What do you think, Russa? What's a poem you like?
I have a bag of poem books, and one of them that I really, really love is Apples with Ashley Apples. And it's very, very fun for me to read.
Oh, why is it so fun?
Because I really like apples, and it's the first one that I ever learned, so it's the most special to me.
That is a very good answer. All right, get your shoe back on. All right. I'm going to read a very special poem called The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gordon. It's a bit of a long poem, so I had to cut it into little pieces a little bit. And I'm going to read it as good as I can. I'm also going to give you guys a copy of the poem and a crayon, because I don't have markers, because I would love for you guys to mark any lines that you really, really enjoyed. Will you take one and then pass one down? They should be front to back. Okay. Crayons. Take one and pass it down. Okay. So you can highlight, make a note of a line you like or one that you're confused by. Put a question mark next to. We're going to read this together. Okay. The Hill We Climb. Oh, I didn't change it. By Amanda Gorman. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we know it. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew. That even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll be forever tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. Because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. While once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every nook of our nation, in every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if we're only brave enough to be it. The end. That is a very special poem. It's really, really good in my opinion. But were there any sentences or lines that you guys, that stuck out to you that you really liked, Noble?
Okay. On the back of the page, it was, wow, once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us?
Why was that line special to you or make you think?
Because sometimes you just need to think of things in a different way, and sometimes it's just, you can get over things, while sometimes you just have to figure out to get around it.
So thinking about things a different way is really good. Toby, did you have any lines you liked? No, not really? That's okay. How about over here?
When me and Zenith were reading, we were wondering what the word benevolent means, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold.
Benevolent is a really good word. From my understanding of the word benevolent, it means to be very giving and kind and loving. A benevolent person would be a giving and kind person. All right, does anybody have any lines they liked or words that were confusing to them? Ressa has highlighted everything. It looks good, Ressa, I like that. Hopefully you all enjoyed the poem and take it home and read it over, give it another thought. It's one of my favorite poems, and they read it at Biden's inaugural speech, I believe. So that's it for the Moment for All Ages. Thank you very much.
All right, let's sing the children out as they head out to religious exploration. Let's quiet our hearts and minds as we enter to this time of prayer and meditation. The Spirit of love, We invite you here this morning into this sacred sanctuary. Let's take a moment to notice our hearts and our breath. Take a few deep breaths in, hold it, and release. This morning, we're so grateful to be surrounded by those we care so deeply about. To be arriving on this spectacular sunny spring morning, blue skies and grass starting to become a little greener, shoots coming up out of the ground, noticing those first bits of green coming out of our trees, hearing birds. This morning we pray for all of the fear in the world right now. We pray for our neighbors near and far. Pray for our friends in Israel, our friends in Iran, in Lebanon, Palestine. And pray for our soldiers stationed in a place where they may be killed. And pray for the leaders of this country and others to regain a sense of sanity, to get back to the better angels of our nature, rather than those of spite and anger and violence and hatred. Pray all this in the name of the Spirit of love, the Spirit of life, the Spirit of connection, the Spirit that is within and among us all. Let's hold all this in our hearts so we enter into a time of silent meditation. I'd invite forward Margaret Rolfe to lead us in the morning's reading.
Today's reading is an excerpt from Sabbath by Wayne Muller. One morning, several years ago, Neil Rudenstein, who was the president of Harvard at the time, overslept. For this perfectionist, in the midst of a major fundraising campaign, it was cause for alarm. After years of nonstop toil in an atmosphere that rewarded frantic overwork, Rudenstein was severely fatigued. Only after a 3-month leave of absence, during which he read essayist Lewis Thomas, listened to Ravel, and walked with his wife on a Caribbean beach, was Rudenstein able to return to his post. That week, his picture was on the cover of Newsweek, beside the headline, "Exhausted." In the relentless busyness of modern life, we have lost the rhythm between action and rest. As the founder of a public charity, I visit the offices of wealthy donors, crowded social service agencies, and the small homes of the poorest families. Remarkably, within this mosaic, there is a universal refrain: I am so busy. We say this to one another as if our exhaustion were a trophy, our ability to withstand stress a mark of character. The busier we are, the more important we seem to ourselves, and we imagine to others. To be unavailable to our friends and family, to be unable to find time for the sunset, or even to know that the sun has set, to whiz through our obligations without time for a single mindful breath. This has become the model for a successful life. Yet the more our life speeds up, the more we feel weary, overwhelmed, lost. Our life and work rarely feel light, pleasant, or healing. Instead, as it all piles endlessly upon itself, the whole experience of being alive begins to melt into one enormous obligation. Because if we do not rest, we lose our way. We miss the compass points that show us where to go, the nourishment that gives us succor, the quiet that gives us wisdom. How have we allowed this to happen? I suggest it is this: we have forgotten the Sabbath.
Thank you, Margaret. Well, I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this in a UU church, but I think I kind of love the Cybertruck. You know, for months, I've gawked at how ridiculous it is. It's like a child's drawing. It's big, it's stupid, it's boxy, it's ugly. It represents all kinds of things. You know, I know that Elon Musk represents everything I abhor about our capitalist system, that we have collectively, as a human species, decided that we will allow a few people to have an obscene amount of wealth while others starve. But last week I gave in. I kind of want one. You know, maybe just because I'm a big sci-fi fan, as you all know. I love Star Wars, I love Star Trek. I saw Project Hail Mary on Friday. Amazing. So part of me is just thinking I might kind of look like the Mandalorian driving around in one. Maybe because I just want to look cool, virile, tough, sexy. You know, so that folks might look at me and say, now, there's somebody who's somebody. You know, because now that I'm a man in my 50s who weighs 40 more pounds than I did in my 20s, whose testosterone levels are dropping, whose skin is getting wrinkly, who's likely entering the last third of my life, maybe half if I'm really lucky. I'm the Cybertruck's ideal demographic, a middle-aged or old man who wants to reclaim those glory days of our youth, much like that Hummer we all remember from the Iraq War. But I actually think the PR campaign in this Cybertruck is brilliant. See, because there will always be a market for this type of vehicle. But see, this one's electric. So when one hunk of ugly metal and machine are both the thing I detest the most about humanity, income inequality, and the one thing I'd feel most strongly about, fighting in whatever way we can the climate crisis. A billionaire and obscenity created by all of us made a truck that is geared for folks who look like me because we like the way we feel in it. But instead of being that gas guzzler, it's electric, a cleaner way to power a vehicle than gasoline. That's one small way to reduce CO2 emissions into our atmosphere. It's two opposing, contradictory truths, all wrapped up there in one car. So friends, I give you Cybertruck theology. There's so many things in our life that are like that we hold two things that seem opposite to one another, but are actually related. Such as, how can we possibly take a break from work and actually be more productive? I want to accomplish more in my career. I should work as much as possible. So how does stopping work regularly actually make us more productive? But yet somehow it does. When I was a kid, Sundays were a day of rest. It was a day that could be counted on to take a break. My family, we went to church in the morning, something that was not optional because my mom was a preacher. Maybe it was just relaxing because I found it was a break from all the homework, from all the activities. And I remember I'd often have youth group in the evening. There was no soccer practice, no play rehearsals, no recitals. There was no chores being done, really, because we didn't have time. No lawn mowing or house painting. Well, sometimes we broke that rule. It was the Sabbath. It was a day that was different from all the other days. It seems so different from our world now. Well, certainly, that setting aside of Sunday doesn't really jive with our modern world here in the United States of America. We're continue to be pulled in a multitude of directions. We're scattered, we're stressed, we're overworked, and we're overwhelmed. Even those who would like to take their spiritual lives more seriously, like I would, will often discover how difficult it is to set aside even a few minutes of the day to stop and really pay attention. I remember one of my ministers said to me, pray every day. And when you are too stressed to pray every day because you're too busy, pray 2 hours a day. According to the Jewish and Christian scriptures that we Unitarian Universalists have emerged out of, we are to stop for not just a few minutes every day, but we are to stop for a whole day, every week, a whole day. It's a holy day, it's a Sabbath. Did you know that this idea of keeping the Sabbath wasn't just a suggestion, it was a commandment. It's one of the 10 commandments that Moses received from God himself up there on the mountaintop. In the first 3 commandments, God reminds the people in Exodus 20, 8 through 11, he says, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols to other gods or bow down before them. You shall not take my name in vain or, quote, make wrongful use of my name, as it translates in more modern translations. And then, right after making clear he is the only one God, he creates this concept of Sabbath. It says, remember to keep the Sabbath day holy. You have 6 days to labor and do all your work, but the seventh day, that's the Sabbath of the Lord your God. That day you shall do no work. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and on the seventh day he rested. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he declared it holy. Well, it was the rabbis over time who interpreted what this commandment might mean when it says that we are to do no work on the Sabbath. The first thing they did, they identified 39 categories of activities to be avoided on Shabbat. And then they fleshed out the implications of all of those. You know, if, quote, if one is not to light a fire, for example, one also not handle matches or kindling. You know, it's easy to look at the Jewish Sabbath as a long list of thou shalt nots. You know, don't turn on lights, don't drive, don't cook, don't carry a pair of scissors anywhere at all. If you carry them, you might be tempted to use them, and cutting is also forbidden on Shabbat. You know, it's okay to carry a stone or a sweater or a scarf, but only inside one's own house, not out onto the streets. Don't plan for the week ahead. Don't write a sonnet or a haiku. Don't even copy down a recipe. Shouldn't play a musical instrument. You know, back in the earliest days of Judaism, there were some groups of Jews who took God's commandment to abstain from work on the Sabbath so literally that they would sit motionless from sundown to sundown for fear that if they moved, they might break this commandment. But by the time Jesus of Nazareth came along, a complex oral interpretation of that law had evolved. Now, this interpretation later became known as the Talmud. It contains long lists of things that are forbidden to do on the Sabbath. The purpose of spelling this out in so much detail was intended to let the people know what was permitted so they wouldn't have to sit motionless with their hands folded for a day. You know, according to one of the legends, the Sabbath was not God's punishment on the people of Israel, but instead it was God's way of giving the people a glimpse of the world to come. Now, this legend said at the time when God was giving the Torah to Israel, he said to them, "My children, if you accept the Torah and observe my commandments, I will give you for all eternity the thing most precious that I have in my possession." "And what," asked Israel, "is that precious thing that thou wilt give us if we obey the Torah?" And God said, "The world to come." But the Israelites insisted. They said, "Show us in this world an example of the world to come." And God replied, "The Sabbath is an example of the world to come." Now, Sabbath isn't intended to be dismal, dreary, painful. You know, the whole idea was to encourage people to obey the Torah by giving them a glimpse of the world to come. This final prize certainly shouldn't be something to dread. So instead, the Sabbath evolved into a day of religious celebration. It became a day in which work was to be set aside so that God could be praised and creation celebrated. It became this day of inspiration. And for those who shaped their lives around the Sabbath, their relationships to nature and to God and to one another were altered. They were deepened and expanded. You know, their lives became more whole, more in touch with the holy. Listen, I know that we're all busy. We rush around in our cyber trucks of contradiction, trying to keep up with it all. We're trying to get it done faster and quicker and easier. We've now even invented artificial intelligence to drive us even faster. There's another contradiction, making our lives easier, yet while heating up our planet because of the buildings that produce this artificial intelligence. But I would invite you to take seriously this ancient concept of Sabbath and figure out there's some way that we can incorporate it into our daily lives. setting aside a large block of time every week to stop working. I take my Sabbath on Tuesday, since I work on Sunday. How could the world survive with any constant vigilance and diligence without our 24/7 connection to the internet? When would we get all our chores done? When would we go shopping? When could our children's sports teams practice and schedule their games? When would our committees meet? For so many of us, even finding a few minutes each day to stop and pay attention seems like a formidable task. Taking a whole day as Sabbath? Impossible. And yet, I know that there are quite a few people right here in this congregation who have been conscious about doing this. Lately, I've heard several of you talking about taking a Sabbath, maybe for a week, month, 6 months. Some of you have discovered that coming here weekly, sitting quietly for an hour, reflecting on our week of our daily lives, it helps to maybe keep things a bit more in perspective. You've discovered the joy of singing, of giving thanks, of acknowledging your blessings. There's lots of people in this congregation who make conscious decisions that setting aside time for family and friends on a regular basis is really important. Something we all desperately learned during COVID when those things were very difficult. Now, there's lots of folks in this congregation who know that our greatest fulfillment in life doesn't come through endless, nonstop work and frenzied, nonstop activity. We weren't built for that. Now, folks who know that real fulfillment, it comes through deepening our relationships, through soaking in the beauty of creation, of going for a walk, of being fully conscious and attentive. I don't mean to suggest that work is bad. If you recall the Christian story in the Torah, God didn't sit around resting for all the days. He worked pretty hard for 6 days, and then he rested. He took time to look at what he'd done, and he found that it was beautiful, it was good. And what I'm suggesting is just a little bit more balance in our lives. The laundry does need to be done. The shopping needs to be done. The lessons need to be learned. Our paychecks need to be earned. Our mortgage has to be paid. It's the work we do during the first 6 days of the week that can make a difference in the world and bring deep satisfaction and meaning into our lives. But here on that 7th day, I would invite you to stop and rest and reflect and notice all that is beautiful and good. And all of us find ways to taste the sweetness of the peace found in the Sabbath. So may it be. Amen. I'd invite forward Don Rolfe to introduce the morning's offering.
Well, in recognition that what makes us community is us, what we do, but also our financial support for this community, this is the time for the offering. In recognition of the shared heritage for the land that this church lives on, the offering today will be split between us and the Piehuasu collective from the Nipmuc Nation. We hope you'll be generous. Thank you.
Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn. It's number 83 in your gray hymnal, Winds Be Still. To those of you who came here this morning seeking the holy, may the holy go with you and be with you. To those of you who came here this morning seeking comforts, may the warmth of an embrace go with you and be with you. To those of you who came here seeking rest and renewal, may the wholeness, which is Sabbath, go with you and be in you, now and forevermore. Go in love, go in peace. I'll now extinguish our chalice, but may its light and warmth stay in our hearts until we meet again. Here ends our worship and our service begin.